So welcome everyone. What if I start telling you that everything we see and we don't see came from one single element? And I mean everything. The computer you are looking at, your body, if you have a glass of water at your side, the water, the glass, the snow, the trees, the sky, the sun, the moon, everything, and I could go on and on and on. The waves we don't see, the sound waves, the Wi-Fi, everything came from one single element, and this is the universal cosmic fluid. This is a topic that is largely explained in the Spiritist literature. Kardec dedicated like hundreds of pages to talk about it, to explain about it, to ask about it. In all the books, probably like most of them, if not all of them, in the Spiritist Review, Emmanuel, André Luiz, they all try to explain and they talk about it and they explain about it. So it's under this literature that we will talk about the universal cosmic fluid today. But before we go ahead, one thing that's important to clarify, it's the word fluid. Because this word today, in our dictionary today, if you read, like I got from Merriam-Webster dictionary, one of the entries is as a noun, and it says that it is a substance, such as a liquid or gas, tending to flow or conform to the outline of its container. Particles that easily move and change their relative position without a separation of the mass. For example, of that, to understand what I mean, like if you get the water, right? The water and you pour the water in a cup, so then, or in a glass, it doesn't matter the shape of the water, the container, that the water will get the shape of the container. And when you are pouring it, while you are pouring it, it doesn't separate in other particles. It goes all together. So this is the definition of fluid today, and that could be a liquid or a gas. But at Kardec's time, this word was used by the spirits, right? When they explained the universal cosmic fluid. And but the word at that time, it was 1850s, late middle 19th century. The word was used for describe anything that they didn't know. So if they didn't know what was it, the scientists, they would say, oh, that's a fluid that's going around. One example is the plague, the bubonic fever. So they knew that was being transmitted between people. It was a deadly disease, but they didn't know what was it. And then they would say, oh, this is a fluid that, is transmitting between people and so on. So then that was okay. That was what they used at that time, right? At the time, the scientists didn't know there was a bacteria going from the rodents to the humans by a flea. So then after they discovered that, but at the point that time, no, then they used to say fluid. So I'm saying that because there is a controversy between spiritists about that word, right? Some people want to change all the literature and use the word energy or something else to describe this today. But we don't know. And in many renowned spiritists, they accept the fluid word and they say it's right and it's okay because we don't know everything yet. And also, what the spirits said at the time, and we can prove some things today that, it wasn't by chance. So if they use the word fluid, so it has something to do with it. And then we shouldn't question, and we should respect their choice of the word and just keep using that word, right? So then let's go ahead and then we see what this universe cosmic fluid, what it is, how come it can create everything, and what it does to our daily lives, right? Let's go. In the question 27 of the Spirit's book, Allan Kardec, after talking about the beginning of things, he asked the Spirits one question, which it was a conclusion that he had from what they were talking and asking and answering. So then he asked the question, there are then two general elements of the universe, matter and spirit? And then the answer was yes. And God, the creator of all things, is above them. These three elements are the principle of all that exists, the universal trinity. They call it universal trinity, right? God created the spirit and the matter. And those were the three things that existed. And this is the universal trinity. So then they go. However, the universal fluid must be added to the material elements. It acts as the intermediary between spirit and matter, as the earthly matter is too dense for the spirit to act upon directly. Although this fluid may be classified as part of the material element from another perspective, it is distinguished by certain special properties. It is something placed between the spirit and matter. It is fluid, just as matter is material, and through countless combinations under the action of the spirit, it can produce an infinite variety of things, of which you only know a very small portion. Without this universal, primitive, or elementary fluid, the agent employed by the spirit, matter would permanently remain divided and would never acquire the properties given to it by gravity. So it's a lot already, right? And we can get many things understand a lot of things from only this paragraph alone. But before we digest that piece by piece, let's see a little bit of our science today, right? Let's see where our science is in search of this fluid or something like that. So let's understand here a little bit of science. To understand this idea of one element becoming all the other elements or combining and transforming and becoming something else, we have the atoms, right? So the atoms, they are single elements. If we may say that, it's not that simple anymore, as we know, but let's think one atom of hydrogen, one atom of oxygen, they are simple elements, okay? Single original elements. So if they combine, even between themselves or with other elements, they become molecules of other elements. So the hydrogen with two atoms of hydrogen, they are not hydrogen anymore. They are hydrogen gas. Same with the oxygen. With three atoms of oxygen, you have the ozone gas, and same two hydrogens, two oxygen, hydrogen peroxide, and so on. And our famous and very well-known water. The two atoms of hydrogens, one oxygen is the water, right? So let's keep this in mind for now, because this will be important for us to understand a little bit more about the universal cosmic fluid. One thing we need to learn here too. What keeps these atoms together and becoming the molecule and keeps that molecule stable as a hydrogen gas or as a water molecule? It is a few laws, a few things that are applied to that keep them stable. So there would be heat, could be the velocity that the atoms revolve around each other, and other things too, right? And the angle they attach to each other. So all these are things that keep this stable, right? Those molecules or those elements stable, the new elements stable. So then another thing. In question 36 of the Spirit book, the question is, does an absolute void exist anywhere in the universe? And the answer is no. What appears to be a void to you is occupied by matter that your sense and instruments are incapable of detecting. So they say that there is no empty space. Something is there, right? And this is a hard work that our scientists and us, if we may say all of us, are doing to find out what is in there, right? And there is like many theories related to that. Some very well established, some not so much, but we selected some of them that will be related to the universal cosmic fluid and could make us understand it a little better, okay? So we have the law of universal gravitation by Isaac Newton, right? According to this law, every particle of matter attracts every other particle. Everything is interconnected. These explain how things are stable and not disperse or disintegrate. So atoms, molecules, beings, objects attract each other. Could be the molecules of water or the planets revolving around each other. Anything stays stable because of this law. What the high spirits seem to indicate in the previous sentence in the other slide is that the agent that causes this attraction is the universal cosmic fluid, or matter alone would remain divided, would be disintegrated, right? Like two atoms would never become a molecule because there was nothing attracting them together, right? So we can also draw some insightful parallels between the Spirit's notion of cosmic fluid and the work of James Maxwell and Albert Einstein. So Maxwell, in the theory of electromagnetism, brought the concepts of magnetism, electricity, and light, and introduced to physics the concept of fields. So all these things, magnetism, electricity, and light, he said they were fields that transmit these elements. And the fields, he thought, was the modification of a subtle structure which he called the ether. However, this ether wasn't never diagnostic in laboratory at the time, never wasn't diagnostic. And then it was left alone. And Einstein, he ignored this ether element, but he developed the theory of relativity only based on the fields, only on the theory of fields. He based his theory of relativity, where he said that fields are no material in nature. So, but the question remained, how is it possible to have fields occurring within nothingness? How the fields travel, right? So the work continued to discover this subtle medium in which fields take existence, okay? So then nowadays we have the dark matter and the dark energy, they are not clear yet. They are not totally understood. But those are the two most recent that talk about this empty space, and that they say there's something there. So the dark matter is like something they discovered because there were this potent telescope and they were looking at the cosmos and the sky or farther away. And some scientists, he saw that there was a ray of light coming, that the bunch of ray of light coming and deviate in the middle of nothing and then continues. So how they say, how come this light can deviate and there is nothing there? So we must have some kind of matter that it is not so subtle that the light kicks on it and deviates. So it was very clear, but they cannot detect it. There is no equipment, nothing that can detect it. And that's what the Spirit said to us, right? So then the dark energy is also something that we don't know. And it's funny because now they call, if they don't know, they call it dark. So it's the same way we called fluid before, right? So that's dark matter because we don't know it. Dark energy because we don't know it. We cannot touch, cannot see, we cannot detect it. So the dark energy is again something that they know it's there because it's a more complicated explanation, but it's basically like it explains that the universe is expanding. So they know there is something else there that's expanding the universe. We are getting further from each other, the planets, the stars, everything. And also because the law of universal gravitation that keeps all these revolving around each other, keeps everything attracted together, it's not enough if they apply that beautiful formula to the planets, to the faraway cosmos, they cannot, it doesn't work. So there's something missing there. So that's why they say that. And then there's the string theory. The string theory is very interesting because it is like, okay, somebody saying that everything came from one simple element that vibrates differently and transform in everything else we know in the universe. Anything familiar? So, not saying this is the universal cosmic fluid theory, and it's most likely not, because we will know more about it and you will see that we are a little bit further from that, the single element, the original universal cosmic fluid. So then we have this from the book, from Genesis chapter 6, item 10, Allan Kardec, right? In this, there is this paragraph that simply resumes everything, like summarizes everything. There is an ethereal fluid that fills space and penetrates bodies. This fluid is ether, or primitive cosmic matter, generator of the universe and beings. Inherent force in ether preside over the metamorphoses of matter, the immutable and necessary laws that govern the universe. They are known on Earth as gravity, cohesion, affinity, attraction, magnetism, and electricity. The vibratory movements of these agents are known as sound, heat, light, etc. So, etc. here, etc. there after the electricity, because, of course, today we already have more than that known, right? So then that was what was known at the time. So there was the things that they gave as an example. So now let's go and see some of the properties of the universal cosmic fluid. Let's learn about that. So the universal cosmic fluid is elementary primitive matter of which the modifications and transformations constitute the innumerable varieties of bodies of nature. It offers two distinct states, its realization or imponderability, normal primitive state, materialization, or ponderability consecutive to the primitive state. Intermediary point is the transformation of the fluid into tangible matter. There is no sudden transition, or our imponderable fluids can be considered as a boundary between the two states. So, what is imponderability and ponderability, right? So, ether is something you don't see, you don't touch, imponderable element. You don't weigh it, you don't see it, you cannot touch it. Material is something that's ponderable, that is heavy, like you can weigh, you can touch, and you see it, okay? So this is very rough explanation about those properties. And then they say that the universal cosmic fluid goes to this state of being ponderable, being an ether, to being material and visible. And there is this transition here that they say it's not sudden, it goes slowly, transform, and become the material, right? One thing we have on Earth that's easy for us to understand and deal with that every day is the water again. The water. You have the water in many different, or let's say 3 states, right? Gas, liquid, and solid, okay? So to understand this transformation they are talking here from an imponderable state to a ponderable state, let's think the water you have there in 3 states. But then let's say if you boil water in your kitchen, in the kettle, and then that's all the vapor coming out, right? So you see the vapor coming out the kettle, and then you don't see it anymore. But suddenly you see that your window, your cold window on your living room, it is condensed. So you know that vapor travels from your kitchen to the window, touch the window, and now you have liquid water, right? And same with when you get liquid water and you go and you put in the freezer, you have the ice water, you have ice, hard water, and it's all water, it's still water, but it's in different states. And then, for example, if we go from, we are outside in the snow, you get your coat or hat full of snow. So you get inside with the heat, it becomes liquid again. With the heat, evaporates. So this is what they say, right? That it's no sudden transition and then it goes from one state to another. So now let's see one other thing here. So the universal cosmic fluid can go from the absolute purity, the single pure element, to the most tangible matter we know, the most hard thing, the rock, right? So, but as they said, there is no sudden transition. So then this goes transforming and transforming and transforming, until it becomes the tangible matter. It's sudden, and it's all variety of fluids that you have in that transformation, right? So let's understand one thing now. With this transformation of the universal cosmic fluid, we have around the earth, around us, around the whole earth, what they call a spiritual atmosphere of the earth. So those are composed by fluids transformed from the universal cosmic fluid. And they are quite heavy, they say. They are closest to the matter state than to the ether state. For us, it's still subtle, it's still invisible, it's still not touchable. But for a highly evolved spirit, they would identify that are more heavier fluids, more coarse fluids. And those are these from this atmosphere, from these fluids, that all the incarnate and discarnate spirits absorb everything they need to live in the earth, either when you are incarnate or when you are discarnate. One thing they explain is like they gave an example as in Jupiter, for example. They say Jupiter is a more evolved country. Not country, planet, right? So it's a more evolved planet. And they don't have that around in the spiritual atmosphere of Jupiter. It doesn't have many of the fluids we have around the Earth because we are less evolved and we have more coarse fluids, more close to the matter state. So every planet has their own spiritual atmosphere, okay? Another thing that's important to understand, this is in constant change. It changes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, like all, even the subtle fluids even more, right? It's not a fixed like environment. Like when we talked about the water, right? You go in the snow, you go inside, then you get liquid water, then you get gas water. So it goes like that, like it's just transformed back and forth, right? So that's this for now. Then this fluid has a very special property, which is a divine property. This is a divine fluid. So in Genesis chapter 2, Kardec is talking about the providence of God, right? How can God preside over everything? So let's read together because this is very, very beautiful. And it's like a long chapter, but then it's very condensed here. They go through a line of thought, like very detailed that make you understand a little better, but let's go. Providence is God's care for all creatures. God is everywhere. He sees all, presides over all. How is it that God, so grand, so powerful, so superior to all, can get involved in the tiniest details and be concerned with the smallest acts and thoughts of each individual? Then they help us to understand this way. Let's imagine a fluid subtle enough to penetrate all the objects, endowed with intelligence, perception, and sensitivity. It sees, understands, and feels. In order to make it easier for us to understand, let us represent God's thought as an intelligent fluid, filling the infinite universe, penetrating all parts of creation. The whole of nature is immersed in the divine fluid. Since each atom of this fluid possesses thought, that is, the essential attributes of divinity, and since this fluid is everywhere, then all is subjected to its intelligent action, its foresight, its solicitude. There is not a being, no matter how minuscule it may be, that is not in some way saturated with this fluid. Hence, we are constantly in the presence of the divinity. There is not one of our actions that we may hide from its gaze. Our thought is in constant contact with his thought, and it's correct to say that God reads the deepest folds of our mind and heart. And they finish that part mentioning the words of Christ. We are in God, just as God is in us, according to the words of Christ. So this is the universal cosmic fluid. This is what we are talking about. This is a divine fluid. So let's now learn a little bit about it with André Luiz. So André Luiz, in this book, Evolution in Two Words, it's psychographed by Chico Xavier. They talk about the the cosmic fluid too. It's the first chapter. There is one part dedicated to talk about it. So he says like that. The cosmic fluid is the divine plasma, the breath of the creator, or the neural force of the all-knowing. In this primordial element, constellations and suns, worlds and beings vibrate and exist, like fish in the ocean. The cosmic fluid or divine plasma is the force in which we all live amid the varied facets of nature. And then he mentions Paul of Tarsus. Yes, he's actually talking about God, right? Not far from each one of us. For in God we live and move and have our being. So it's the same idea, in other words, and he brings this idea of a neural force, which if you think about us, our nerves in our body, anything that happens in our body, inside or outside, there is a connection to our brain. And electrical stimulus or some other stimulus communicate it, right? So we know everything that happens in our body. We know immediately. So that's the idea, right, of this fluid being from God, the neural force of God, right? And then he explained how we co-create with this fluid, right? So he says that we have co-creation on a higher plane and co-creation on a lesser plane. The glorious intelligences connected to the Supreme Lord work together. Take the divine plasma and turn it into cosmic dwellings of all kinds. That's what the highly evolved spirit does. And we, on a similar foundation, human intelligence, much like ourselves, use the same cosmic fluid, which is in constant circulation in the universe, for co-creation on a lesser plane. But before we know what we do, let's know how we can do it, right? How can we use this fluid? So let's see better. So remember that the fluid there, from the spirit to the matter, and we had the spiritual atmosphere of the earth, right? From this atmosphere, from this fluid, there is a kind of fluid that's called spiritual fluid. They call like that to explain it. This is all in chapter 15 in Allan Kardec in Genesis, right? Like you see the references there mostly are from Genesis. And they say, these spiritual fluids are one of the states of the universal cosmic fluid. And they are the vehicle for thought, as the air is for sound. So they are saying that our thought travels through one place to another through this spiritual fluid. And they give the example. So the same way the air travels through the sound travels through the air. So if you make a sound, it gets to somebody else's ear because you produce waves of sound that travels in the air and reach somebody else's ear. So it's the same idea. The thought travels through the spiritual fluid, that special transformation of the universal cosmic fluid. But how we do that? So in the question 23, the question is simple, the answer is simpler. What is the spirit? The intelligent principle of the universe. This is a spirit's book. So we are intelligent beings. And with this intelligence, we do this with the spiritual fluids. We can change them, right? So let's see how we do that. Spirits act upon spiritual fluids using the help of thought and will, which are to the spirit what hands are to humans. By means of thought, spirits can impress this or that direction to the fluids, like to the spiritual fluids, agglomerate, combine, or disperse, apply appearance, shape, color, alter their properties according to certain laws. So we can do whatever under the laws, right? So we so as we see here, it's not only the thought. We can also have the will, the intention. So we can put some spice on our thoughts, right? So it's not only the thought. And we have help here again to understand this better. Sometimes these transformations are the result of an intention. Often they are the product of an unconscious thought. It is enough for a spirit to think about something in order for it to be produced. It is enough for a spirit to form a melody in the mind for it to reverberate through the atmosphere. Fluid brings thought to us, just as the air brings sound. In such fluids, there are waves and rays of thought that cross each other without mixing, just as in the air, there are sound waves and rays. So, what they are saying here, yes, we can think with intention. So we can spice up this thought, right? And it doesn't matter. You cannot stop it. Like you think, it's there. It's out there. And it's transforming these fluids in whatever you thought. Even if you think about a song, it already reverberates in the spiritual fluid and the melody is out there, you know. And also they are saying something here. Another condition that we can think about that. The thoughts doesn't cross each other and mix it up. So they can be independent in the air. Like the sound, right? The waves and rays of sound. So you can, there is noise in the kitchen, there is noise outside, there is noise in the computer, you are listening to the TV, then somebody is doing things here, things are falling, making noise. All those sounds come together. You can hear all them parallel and they don't mix it, right? They are all separate, right? So that's one of the important things they are saying here. Now, let's go back then and see what we co-create with this. Now we know how to create. So, first, co-creation on a higher plane. In the Old Testament, right in the beginning in Genesis, in the first chapter, first and second paragraph, it's written simple like that. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void. So it was empty and had no form, right? And then we know what happened after, create one by one, everything. In the planet, in the book On the Way to the Light, is written by Emmanuel, psychographed by Chico Xavier. Right in the beginning, first chapter, there is a part called the planetary genesis. And he goes like that. There is a community of pure spirit chosen by the Supreme Lord of the universe, whose hands hold the guiding reins of the life of all planetary collectivity. This community, made up of perfect angelic beings, of which Jesus is one of the divine members. And then he talks about Jesus. The divine sculptor put the chisel of his mercy to the block of a shaped mile. He shaped the geological sculpture of the earthly orb, chiseling out the blessed and grand school. where his heart would be expanded in love, light, and justice. So he's saying that Jesus, with his co-workers at his level, they build up all this universe we see. And Jesus himself built up and shaped this beautiful earth where we live in. And he did that with all his love, light, and justice, because this is our grand school, right? And then Allan Kardec in Genesis, in this chapter 8, this chapter, this passage here, it's about Kardec is discussing all the theories of the origin of the earth that existed at his time, right? There were many. They were very fun to read. And then Kardec explains each of them, why they could not be possible or could be or whatever. And then one of them, he goes like that. One might more rationally understand the idea of a collectivity of spirits in charge of developing and guiding it, the earth, guiding the earth's constitutive elements, the spirit to whom the lofty guidance of the moral destinies and progress of its inhabitants has been entrusted. A mission that could only be attributed to a being eminently superior in wisdom and knowledge. So 3 texts from 3 different times, from 3 different authors, and they say basically the same thing, right? So now, what else a being like Jesus can do, right? A spirit with his level. So again, in Genesis, Allan Kardec, in this chapter 15, he talks about the superiority of Jesus among us, upon us, right? So there is no doubt about it, right? But in this chapter 15, Kardec talks about, explains and or gives light to all the miracles of the gospel. That's the name of the chapter, the miracles of the gospel. He gets one of it, like all of them or most of them, of what Jesus did, the doings by Jesus at his time, when he was incarnated with us, and he gives it clarity. And most of the time, of course, it is explained under the understanding of the universal cosmic fluid and how that works. So Jesus was a spirit who dominated matter completely. He knew how to shape a planet. So he had the knowledge and the wisdom to do it, right? So, but he did it with all his love, right? And under certain circumstances and selection of what he was doing, right? Another thing that Kardec brings to us, like just remind us 2 things, right? When in the Gospels, when the apostles talks about something that Jesus did, how many times they say, but Jesus, knowing their thoughts, said to them. So Jesus knew our thoughts because we think and we build up that atmosphere around us. And Jesus just scanned it and that's it. He knew everything. There was nothing to hide because he had this involvement. He was in this level of being able to do that, right? And another thing that was very nice to understand and to see this perspective that Kardec brings to us, he said, how many times again Jesus cured somebody or did help somebody change their life for good, right? How many times? How many people? What he said to them when they say thank you? Your faith saved you. What is this phase? So Kardec put this phase as being, I'm gonna get the right word here. I'm gonna mix it up. He says, this phase here meaning that it's the attracting power that is within us. It's that attracting power. And then he explained it that we were able, or the person who was cured or was able to change their behavior, moral behavior for good, it had attracted the fluid current that was offered to us. Like that. Jesus could grab all the good fluids and offer to somebody. Look, here you are, all the good fluids. You take it, but you only take it if you have that faith, which is that attracting power to attract those fluids and retain it and let it go the other fluid. So it's that powerful that it was, right? So now let's see what we can do. So what we can do. I think the better way to understand what we do is to understand a little bit more about how we affect these spiritual fluids with our thoughts, right? So fluids are the vehicle for thought. We know that. Thought modify the properties of the fluids. We know that already. Fluids are impregnated with the good or evil qualities of thought. Fluids change according to the purity or impurity of sentiments. Evil thoughts corrupt spiritual fluids as harmful miasmas corrupt breathable air. Fluids that surround evil spirits or are projected by them are noxious. Fluids that receive the influence of good spirits are as pure as the spirit's degree of moral perfection. The diversity of good and bad fluids is as great as the diversity of thoughts. If one can imagine, right? How many out there? In other words, some words we know better. From a moral point of view, the thoughts could be bringing hate, envy, jealousy, goodness, love, benevolence, charity, right? All that and more and more and more. From a physical point of view, the fluids could be impregnated with excitement, calm, be penetrating, irritating, narcotic, toxic, reparatory. So it's an infinite variety of possibilities that we can apply to this fluid with our thoughts, right? So then there is this very touching, and I call it a wake-up call from Kardec. And we should read that together too, because that's very touching. When we believe that a thought is deeply hidden in the folds of our soul, we do not suspect that we carry within us a mirror that reflects it. If we were to see the mechanism of the radiation impregnated by it, if we were to see the mechanism of the invisible world that surrounds us, the diffusion of the conductor wires of thought that connect all corporeal and incorporeal intelligent beings, the fluidic emanations charged with imprints of the mental world and which, like real currents, crisscross space, we would be less surprised by certain effects that ignorance has attributed to chance. So let's now see how we can change our thoughts. Can we? Can we put that spicy that we are talking about in the thought, that will, that intention? Yes, we can. We can, and we know that very much, that we have tons of possibilities out there, like hundreds of possibilities, millions of possibilities, right? And we know that, and we talk about that a lot. So we can do some meditation, visualization, share some love, listen to some music, exercise, cultivate a hobby. How happy are we when we are doing that thing we love the most, right? Be in touch with the nature, read a good book, receive a healing touch, a path that helps changing our atmosphere of fluids, right? Help our connections. And that's not meaning a path from the Spiritist Center. We can go, we know the other healing techniques that are out there, like healing touch, hake, we know them, right? Them all work with the energy uh, fluids that are around us, right? We can cultivate a garden and go to counseling, When things bother your mind, counselors have a way to help us clarify and bring us to a better perspective or another way of thinking of those things, right? But the most powerful of them all, it is a sincere and pure prayer coming from our heart, right? In the Gospel according to Spiritism, there is a whole chapter talking about it. The chapter is called Ask and It Will Be Given to You. And they explain how the prayer works and how it works with your thought, the universal cosmic fluid. So your thought pregnates those fluids that travel to wherever you are sending that prayer, or to whoever you are sending that prayer, or communicates you to your guardian angel, to the superior beings, all our benefactors that can help us, as long as we open that connection and we have that connection. And we don't mean we need to be kneeling to pray or having a teddy bear to hug. We don't need that. That's just a figure. But we can pray anywhere, anytime. If you need an object, if you need something yet, that's fine. That's fine too. Anything that helps you to open that connection. And that's a good start, right? So here we are, somewhere in the earth, trying our best, doing our best we can at this point in time. And there is somebody who believes on us, and it's Jesus, our master, our benefactor, our great benefactor. And he believes on us. So let's help him to make the best, to enlighten this planet, right? And keep it in good stand, taking care of ourselves, of others, taking care of the nature, and above all, watching our thoughts. So thank you everyone for listening, and may the peace of Jesus be within us.